Okay, do you mind introducing yourself further?
My name is Pam Hrncir, and I'm the Covenant Pastor for Congregational Care at Williamsburg Presbyterian Church.
And Pam, can you take me through a quick timeline of your life? Sort of a broad overview.
Well, my dad was military, so we moved probably approximately every 2 to 3 years. For a while it was 2 years, and then, no, actually it was every 2 years except for my last 3 years in high school. We were in LA for 3 years. So I decided to go to the Air Force Academy, and did that for 4 years. So that was the longest I had ever lived anywhere. Was at the Air Force Academy, and then from there I went to pilot training, which was in Del Rio, Texas, which is on the border. It's 2 hours west of San Antonio on the border of Texas and Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Very small town, but great for flying. From there I got assigned as a first assignment instructor pilot in the T-38, and we did that. I got married there as well. My husband was in pilot training. We met at the Air Force Academy. And so we were assigned there as they call it first assignment instructor pilots. I was in the 38, he was in the 37. We stayed there, we were probably instructor pilots for about 4 years, but a total of 5 years to include pilot training.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was assigned to the KC-135 tanker at Ellsworth Air Force Base in Rapid City. My husband got the B-1 bomber. At the time, women were not permitted to fly any combat aircraft, so that wasn't an option for me. So we moved to South Dakota, and very excited. We loved it. We took a risk and bought 10 acres of land that we wish we hadn't sold. It was on the border of National Forest, so nothing was going to get built behind us. And we got 2 horses. So apart from our flying, we really enjoy that lifestyle. We went horse camping a couple times. I thoroughly enjoyed the Black Hills. It's just a beautiful, beautiful area. Being west like that. That time for me was a lot of deployments, and then after the first Iraq War, the Air Force decided to reorganize. And Brent and I, we were in the same command, and then we weren't in the same command, and that made it difficult as married people. So originally they gave me the option to stay there, and we were ready to try to have children, so I did that in a non-flying job. Then a year later, the Air Force changed again. They didn't want me to stay there. They wanted me to go back to flying. So they transferred me to San Antonio, Texas. So we were 1,400 miles apart for about 14 months. The Air Force at the time, going through so many changes, was not very accommodating to joint spouse, which is what my husband and I were. And they were being very, very difficult. So I did end up getting pregnant. I was struggling with infertility for about 10 years, but I ended up getting pregnant with triplets. So when that happened, I decided to get out because the deployment pace was still very high, and I didn't trust the military not to deploy both of us at the same time. So I elected to get out of the service. Did not retire. I separated. That is an important distinction. I do not get retired. I did not retire. I separated. So from there, I became a stay-at-home mom. Brent decided to get out a year or 2 later, went to United Airlines, and we moved to Illinois to be close to his hub in Chicago. Then 9/11 happened, and the airlines went through significant downsizing, so he was furloughed. So we went back in the Air Force. I should say my husband went back in the Air Force. Got transferred to Langley Air Force Base, and then we got transferred to Dias Air Force Base in Abilene, Texas. And then he was ready to retire, so we got transferred back here to Langley, which is where we live in Toano right now. So the goal was for him to be able to commute to Langley and then go back to the airlines. So then it was during that time when we moved back here that I was volunteering at a church, and the pastor said, hey, have you thought about seminary? So then I went to seminary, And it worked out well because I started seminary right shortly after he retired. So his airline schedule accommodated me being able to go to seminary. So he, I had been the lead parent for 16 years. He kind of picked up the role as lead parent
Wow.
while I went to seminary. So, and that took, instead of 3, it took 4. And then I did my chaplain internship, and then I was seeking my first call, and was thinking about going into chaplaincy, and then this came available, and here I am.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. So much movie. Let's see. Can you tell me a little bit about your faith journey?
Sure. So growing up, my parents weren't particularly big churchgoers. I would say it was more Christmas than Easter. So when I was in 6th grade, I had a friend who was Catholic, and she started going to whatever Catholics do around that time. And I went home and said, well, why don't I go to church school? So my parents, my mom had been brought up in the Methodist church. So we joined a Methodist church, and I got confirmed there. And I was more active in their summer programs than I was in the youth group. Didn't do a ton with the youth group, but I went backpacking. They had a backpacking trip that was phenomenal up in Yosemite that still to this day was very amazing trip. But then, I'll be honest, my parents kind of jumped from church to church, and I would just sort of jump in where I could. But again, primarily the summer trips were where I got my most of my connections, because again, we weren't regular churchgoers. And then I went to the academy, and I would try, for a while I was trying to go to chapel, and they were accusing us of going to chapel only to get out of formation, so I just stopped that. And occasionally I would go to church on Sundays. But I'd always had, really from the beginning of when I was in 6th grade, when my friend went, sort of had this tug towards, I would say, God or something, bigger out there. Just really couldn't put words to it. So even at the academy, I would periodically go to church, and then I met my husband. He is a cradle Presbyterian. We kind of joked that he was over-churched and I was under-churched. So, I mean, he's went to church on Wednesdays, went to church on the weekends. And his mom made him do everything. So. But we would go to the Presbyterian church downtown. And then we got married in the Presbyterian church. And then, even as young married people, we tried to go to church on Sundays. But that was about the extent of it. When we moved to South Dakota, we were at the Presbyterian church there. They had a younger couple. In fact, not much, well, maybe 10 years older than we are. They just recently retired. So they really reached out to us, and she especially to me really just started inviting me to lunch and getting to know me. And then then she'd go, hey, why don't you volunteer for this? And then eventually she invited me to a small group Bible study. And
Pam?
Yeah.
How long are you gonna be here?
Till 4.
You want to reach out to that?
Man, it doesn't want to. Okay, I think it's okay. Sorry.
To see if I could do schoolwork again. Totally loved it. And I sat with them and I said, should I go to seminary? And they're like, you got to trust the nudge. Because I going to seminary, I didn't have a clear picture of what my end product was going to be. Because so many of the youngsters that are going there, the other good news was I went there and about 50% are second career. So that made me feel better. And I wasn't the oldest person there. So that made me feel good, but I didn't have a clear picture of what I was going to be at the end of seminary. Like, am I going to go into nonprofit work? Am I going to be a pastor? Am I going to be Christian ed? And they said, that's okay. You got to trust the nudge. And then, one of the professors said, your brethren are here. Which I was like, what? And she goes, your brethren are here. So I applied, got in, and it was hard. It was hard with my family. It was hard commuting because I wasn't part of their community as much. It was really hard that way. It's hard academically, but I would say it very much brought me a new perspective on my faith and on God and its role in our community. Union's a big social justice, has a big social justice emphasis, and that really helped me. And I think what I was struggling with is orthodoxy versus orthopraxy, and I'm more of an orthopraxy person than an orthodoxy person, and they helped me see that. So I graduated chaplaincy. I still didn't feel comfortable with what I was going to do. Chaplaincy for me was finally hit home. Like I did it, and I was like, this is who I am. So, and then I was going to go in the chaplaincy, and then this opened up. So, and it's all just kind of fallen into place, which is hard because, I spent a lot of time going, did I just waste 5 years of my life? Because we weren't going to move for a position, so because I still have 2 girls in high school.
Right.
So, but it does. It all sort of falls into place, and I don't know. Does that answer any of your questions?
Oh, lots and lots. One question I still have is, what do you think, after all your discernment, is the purpose of church now?
This is going to sound really cliche, the gospel. I don't think we're very good at communicating the gospel, but that really is what people are looking for, and that is transformation and connection and with God. We're all born to God, we die to God, and I think it's helping. It's being the space where they can encounter God, whether it's worship, whether it's our ministries, it's giving people that chance to have that awakening like I did through relationships. And I don't mean it. I don't think it's about repent, confess your sins, that type of stuff. I believe it's through our relationships where people, just like I did in that small group, that people encounter Jesus and then they're awakened to God's grace, and I think we desperately need that out there in the world. I don't, as I was telling some people, like London recognizes they have a loneliness problem, so they have set up a ministry for loneliness. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I've read an article about it.
Yeah, so here we go. Well, there's the answer is the gospel, right? If we could love our neighbors and spend time with them and listen to them, and the loneliness goes away. So,
I like that.
Healing and transformation. So, my Hebrew professor was talking about how he preached at a church, and they're like, "Oh, we love you," because they were trying all these different things. No one's coming to church. And he said, "All you got to do is preach the gospel." But I think we might have a cultural theology of what that means, and so I'm not sure we're very good at either putting that into words or putting that into action. I think we make it more complicated than it needs to be.
I see. And what ministries at this church do you feel passionately about?
What I'm doing. I mean, this is ideal. Congregational care, pastoral care is where I'm called right now, definitely. And then I also am excited about overseeing the new members, because that way so since we moved around a lot, we know what it's like to be outsiders, and we know what it's like. We've been in good churches where people are very welcoming and connect us right away, and we've been at other churches where you sit on the periphery. So eventually I want to be mostly concerned with those who sit on the periphery of the church
Mm.
and beyond. But I mean, I am a congregational care pastor, so helping people feel comfortable to get involved and connected in the church.
And you talked a little bit about how you were like, we don't have to be Presbyterian, we can go somewhere else. But why are you Presbyterian?
Because every time I went to a new members class, I liked what I learned about Presbyterianism. I like, being Presbyterian is more about how our government's set up, right? How we're going to organize ourselves, and I like how we organize ourselves. I like that we have accountability. I mean, it does take a long time to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got to be careful that we don't allow the bureaucracy to get in the way of our mission. I get that, but it's important that we are consensus building. It's important that we are diverse. It's important that we get together and talk and dialogue. Now, it doesn't always happen, but we need to do that. And when we took polity at seminary, I believe very strongly in mutual forbearance and freedom of conscience. Mutual forbearance, humility, I don't know everything, patience to listen, faithfulness to one another, that means staying committed in the relationship, and then loving one another. I mean, there it is. And, I really question some of these other churches that spring up about, one, are they willing to be diverse, have diverse opinions of other people, and two, what kind of accountability do you have, in regards. And the other thing I really like about the Presbyterian Church is that we don't have a long list of essential tenets. As a confessional church, we abide by the confessions as well as, our polity, but, even the confessions say, reforming, ever reforming. I mean, we expect to continue to learn and to continue to question and to continue to understand. So all those things are important.
And I know you haven't been a member here very long, but how do you think the church has changed? I think you said 3 years you've been here?
I think I've been at this church?
Mm-hmm, this particular church.
I think Rachel's done a real good job. I mean, I think I see more young people from the college coming. I mean, I think that's very nice. I've seen a big change in that. And I think we're starting to get more families, which is important. And I would say generally, I feel like the church is becoming more personable and more welcoming.
And how do you think the church as a whole?
Like the big church?
Mm-hmm.
Some people talk that we're in another Reformation, and I think that there could be some truth to that, and understanding who we are. I mean, it's really sad to have all these big divides about, it's just so sad. I mean, it doesn't, I think what we're battling right now, like I used the term before, cultural theology. That's what my supervisor in, when I was doing the chaplain internship, called it. Sort of this, they get this theology that's really, I'm not sure if it's grounded in anything biblical. It's just, sort of the impression, and I don't know, and then people just think that's how it is for everyone. We don't, like all denominations believe that. Well, that's a certain, there's the spectrum, there's the conservative and liberal and everything in between. And I would say I don't think our culture appreciates that there's a spectrum, and so they get turned off by one side. They're not willing to think that, there's another, and that you're allowed to have another perspective of God in your faith, and that there can be another perspective of God in your faith if something has turned you off. And because I do believe it's very important to be connected to a faith community, and we can't grow without that.
How would you like to see WPC change in the future?
That's a really good question. become more relational. How do we do that? I mean, I think we are in some parts, honestly. I think we just need to continue to build on that because we are big and work on helping everyone be connected. There's usually a story why people aren't connected. So the easy thing to do is just minister to those who show up, right?
Yeah.
That's the easy thing to do. Well, why are the others not showing up? That's always my question. You know, I always think back, well, what if Kathy hadn't invited me to lunch?
Probably wouldn't be here.
So, you know, and that's all, you know, it all began there. So, I mean, it's not that hard. It's about willing to say, I want to get to know you for no other reason than to get to know you. Not to get your money, not to make you join a committee, just to get to know. And I think especially with, I think so many demands are put on us in the world today, just to have someone say, I want to get to know you. Like, no strings. So.
And then what in WPC gives you hope and what in the larger church gives you hope? So you can start on either one.
I would say the people of WPC. I think the faithfulness of our older congregants. It touched me when I was interning here, since I can't serve communion, and watching them literally hobble up to take communion. And I mean, I think that's the easy thing would be to stay at home, and they don't. And I don't know. I just really and I found that too when I was chaplain in the assisted living in the convalescent centers, that the faith of the older folks is just so hope filled. Even though, I mean, like, they would joke, oh, you know, I'm not getting out of here. You know, this is my last address, and yet their faith sustains them. You know, and so I would say that there's a lot of things to be hopeful for. I mean, you know, you guys, the families. I mean, so the people. It's always about the people, and the church as a whole. I think we're getting there. I think I don't know if much of it. I mean, obviously there's a segment of the larger church that I disagree with. That's divisive. But I think there's a lot of good work that doesn't get acknowledged by the church of building dialogue and relationships. So if you're around me long enough, I think it's all about relationships. I think it's about dialogue. I think it's about embracing diversity through unity. And I think we're getting there. I was very inspired by Philadelphia. You know, this church, the main church died, and then it's sort of rejuvenating because it's become an outreach for homeless people. Have you heard of that? Which one? That one in Philadelphia? I forget what it's called. You know, that's hopeful to me, and I think we're doing more of that. And you know, churches are having to reimagine themselves, and it's the same. Baltimore has a similar I mean, it's not the exact program, but they have something similar where downtown churches at least are reimagining themselves and how they can be part of the community. So that all gives me hope. So.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't know what I've said.